You've been through these before. This usually is the type of deal that happens in mid to late July, not mid June. So, what do you make of the timing of this and these two teams pulling something like this off as early as they did?
Well, I think the first thing I look at is the actual baseball trade. The Giants made a great trade. They just got a hell of an offensive player that they desperately need to go with their really good pitching. I think this is a stamp for them that puts them in a position to challenge the Dodgers and be one of the leading guys for the leading teams for the wild card. I think on the return side, Kyle Harrison has struggled and is possibly at best a fourth starter or maybe a bullpen piece. Jordan Hicks is a bullpen piece. He's failed as a starter. The kid that they got from Tibbs kid from Florida State has really struggled in high A, and his main thing that he can do is hit, and he hasn't done that. He's probably a bat-only guy at this point. So when I look at it from an evaluation standpoint, I think the Giants clearly won the trade. But this runs a lot deeper than just that. And what it tells me is the Red Sox really wanted to get rid of Rafael Devers because I think if they put him on the market, they could have got a better package back. I think if you waited to the trading deadline or in the offseason, you could have got a better package. But I think he must be becoming somewhat of a nuisance in the clubhouse in the sense that the young players, this is not the guy that should be the leader for them. But it's a heck of an offensive player that you just gave up.
No doubt about that. As you said, Alex, having one of his best years, the plate discipline has been outstanding. A team without Alex Bregman right now, leaning on him as the sort of battleship of the fleet, right? That big bat in the number 2 spot of the lineup, and we saw it play out publicly, right? We don't have to rehash the whole thing, but you go back to the beginning of spring training when he was asked if he was DH, and he said no. He didn't ask for a translation. As soon as the question was out of English, he said no, but he did end up DHing. And then when Tristan Casas went down, he did not move to first base. And John Henry flew to Kansas City on a Friday night with Sam Kennedy and Craig Breslow. And it was John Henry, we are told, who had the meeting with the player, with Devers that night. And you would think after a meeting where the owner comes to the $300+ million player that there would be some movement on, but there wasn't. He never took grounders at first base with the Red Sox, right? He's gone back out. We learned later there was a groin issue he was dealing with, and that certainly impacts all of it. But for this deal to be done now, and Alex, the question I have for you at the beginning of my question is, have you heard any reports? I've read reports. Have you heard anything about him being shopped around? Did they talk to other teams? What do you know about the process leading to this trade?
I want to be very clear about what I do and don't know. And right now, I don't know more than I do know. But I definitely did hear from at least one other team that had heard from the Sox within the last week about whether or not they might be interested in engaging on Rafael Devers. There were no substantive discussions with that team, but it was a team that wasn't the Giants. That the Red Sox connected with. So, you do wonder a little bit whether or not this was related to. I've been watching this young group of Red Sox guys coming up together for a while, and the kind of the sense in the organization that it will be ultimately a culturally transformative group, where the dynamic that exists, the kind of win. The loving to win ethos of the guys who talk constantly about duck boats and Roman Anthony and Marcelo Meyer, along the way, Christian Campbell joining that group. They have often talked about the future that they see with those guys setting the tone. And so you do wonder whether or not this trade was perhaps hastened by that intersection once Roman Anthony was called up. That is purely speculative. But again, I had heard from at least one other team that the Red Sox had sought to engage them, or at least kind of felt out their interest in talking about Devers within the last week.
JP, when a team decides they're going to move on from a superstar, how do you make sure that does not become a disruptive event for the rest of the clubhouse? They're on a long flight across the country right now as we speak. How does Alex Cora get everybody on the same page? What does Craig Breslow have to do here as the head of baseball ops to make sure that a team that suddenly has a little bit of momentum doesn't let this move scuttle their season?
Well, I think Cora will do a really good job with this. He'll pull the team together tomorrow in the clubhouse, have a meeting. I would assume that Craig Breslow at some point will get out on the West Coast and address the team. I think it's important that whoever is making the decisions is front and center. This is the time as a front office executive where you have to show the team that you're in it with them, and they're going to all want explanations. Instead of trying to explain to 26 guys individually, you sit them down and you say, this is why we did it. This is what we were hoping to do. If anybody got any questions, I'm here to answer them right now. But I'm front and center for the organization. I think it's going to be a little bit of a shock to some of the younger players. What does Christian Campbell look around and say? I just signed an 8-year deal, so wow, I could be dealt at some point too. But I think now it comes down to, I hate to use this word because I don't think it's the right word in some sense, but it is some crisis management that the front office has to get down there and explain. Listen, we were going to trade Roy Halladay one year, and we had a really good package from Philadelphia, but Philadelphia didn't want to put the one extra piece we wanted, and Halladay was aware of the trade. We had told him, but they wouldn't put it in. And we went to him and said, listen, we can't make this trade because it doesn't help us unless we get these players. And he understood, but he was in lockstep with us. So I think being able to communicate to the players and to the organization is going to be big right now.
Alex, the last member of the 2018 World Series championship team has been dealt. Literally the end of an era. And this is a team that Alex Cora has, well, there it is. Alex Cora has talked about this team in some ways being too young, right? That leaning on the veterans, right? We didn't see Meyer or Anthony in the starting lineup today because you want to get Romy Gonzalez and Rob Refsnyder and some veterans and guys who can hit left-handed pitching. I understand that. But what does all that do now to this team that just got younger today? How does this affect the leadership void?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there are going to be a lot of people there who don't know either. This is not an event where you can exactly predict what the fallout, what the dominoes are going to be. This is an introduction of kind of a chaotic event, and there's a chance that it goes in a lot of different directions. It is possible that something like this, theoretically, like, can it galvanize a team? Sure, right? Like we saw when the Red Sox dealt Manny Ramirez, it was in 2008. It was certainly a shock for the Red Sox, a shock for the players. Everyone knew about his unhappiness. Nonetheless, it was a startling event, and it was one that the Red Sox kind of, pulled together from and moved forward. Of course, in that case, they got an all-star back in Jason Bay, so it was a little bit different. Nomar Garciaparra, we dealt with the shock of him being traded and thinking, "Whoa, this is quite a landscape changer." And again, that was a case where there was a cultural change that happened in the aftermath of that. We've seen, we lived it, and we also saw the comeback, kind of reflecting upon what happened inside of the Red Sox after Nomar Garciaparra was traded, and how there was a lighter culture that existed inside of the walls of the Red Sox. But, there were other times when it totally goes off the rails. 2014, the Red Sox end up dealing guys like John Lester and John Lackey at the deadline. Those guys weren't politicking. Well, certainly Lester wasn't trying to leave Boston. He wanted to spend the rest of his career there. There was a shock there, and the Red Sox went down the chute. So it is, you don't know. At least JP, like, that's my sense of it. You have a much better, when you make a deal like this, do you think that what direction kind of the, let's call it the intangibles of a roster are going to go?
I think the Red Sox have totally bought into being young. I think they're really convinced that their young players are the way to go, and I have no problem with that. I think we should back up a second, too, and just make a point here. The Giants might be one of the only teams in baseball left that are run by a baseball guy that would make this decision to take this contract on, because I could tell you the prior front office would have never made this trade. So there's probably only a few teams out there that have some baseball people that would be willing to take a contract like this on. But if I'm looking at it from the Giants standpoint and I can handle the money, I gave up nothing and I got a really, really good player. So that's the one I'm scratching my head on. But I think this trade is all about where the Red Sox want to go, the culture they want to have, the precedent they want to set, the environment they want to play in, and I think they're entrusting Alex Cora to keep this ship going in the right direction, and I think he's the right guy to do it. But I just think deep down they just really wanted to get rid of Devers.
JP, we talk about culture. We don't, we never really know what happens behind the walls of a clubhouse. We're not there on game night. We're there before and after and all of that, but we don't really know. But if this was about culture, how much concern do you have about culture to overlook the 904 OPS, the 15 home runs, the production, right? Because if there was a problem in the clubhouse, and I don't know if there was, right? They've done a good job keeping that in-house for the most part. We haven't heard players complain about Rafael Devers, but he was certainly performing on the field. And you're on this run right now. You just swept the Yankees.
Right.
So take us through that sort of calculus, right? Like, okay, I want to address this problem. On the other hand, this is what I'm getting out of the guy.
Well, that's a great question, because I remember telling Alex Anthopoulos, who was my assistant at the time, who's now the GM of the Braves, I said, Alex, when we trade Roy Halladay is not coming back. We're not going to replace Roy Halladay with Roy Halladay. So I think the reality is the hitter you gave up is probably one of the top 10 offensive players in our game. You're not going to get that guy back. So how do you recreate that? And I think that's the biggest challenge that's going to be in front of the Red Sox, and why I think it's important that they rally the troops. But you have to explain to this group, I think, why you did this and why this move was made. Not that they're going to understand it, but they need to know, here's the direction, here's why. Who's going to fill that? I don't think there's anybody there that's going to fill what his offensive production is. So I'm sure they're aware of that, but that's a big, big piece to lose. And at the major league level, we could talk about prospects all we want, but the guy that puts the numbers up and punches that clock every day, they're hard to find.
Alex, someone's got to be the DH tomorrow night in Seattle. Who's it going to be, and who's it going to be in a week, and who's going to be the primary DH in the weeks to come for the Red Sox?
What a question, TC. Yeah, I mean, look, they have options. I haven't even looked ahead to see what the rotation is going to look like for the Mariners in Seattle. But obviously, there's going to be a pretty fair amount of mix and match that's going on for the short term. There's not a guy that's sitting with the Woo Sox right now. JP's seen a lot of the Woo Sox. There's not another Rafael Devers who's now sitting there. Who's now sitting there waiting to jump up and be that role. So yeah, it's going to be taking advantage of matchups. You do wonder now that there's a path for Masataka Yoshida, how long would it take him to be ready to be just a DH, since the arm has been the thing that's been holding back his progression. I saw him clearing the bullpen in batting practice the other day. So at the very least, strength there doesn't seem to be an issue, although you would think that timing is a major issue for Masataka Yoshida, since he's probably been hitting off of the trajectory, but hasn't seen live pitching since 2024. So, from that vantage point, you would think that he will need, you wonder whether or not there's going to be a very soon to start rehab assignment for Yoshida. But I would think that even with the work that he's been doing on kind of VR type settings, that you're still looking at, maybe another week to two for him to slot in as a DH. Although, you could, by that point, maybe Bregman keeps pushing the envelope and is a consideration to come back around that time, in which case, that's not a terrible offset to where the offense is right now.
Does this help Roman Anthony get more playing time if Wilyer Abreu comes back on the early side? Do you cycle the outfielders through the DH to keep Anthony here and in the lineup?
Yeah, you would think that would, you would think that some of the Red Sox kind of bottleneck in terms of at bats would be resolved. Alex Cora had been talking about it in recent days, saying, it's going to be kind of interesting to figure out the 26 that we have, with Wilyer Abreu looking like there's a pretty good chance he's going to be coming off of the IL on Friday in San Francisco. Again, what a fun game that's going to be, with Rafael Devers right away playing against the Red Sox, come Friday. But yeah, that's going to be, I think, TC, to your point. Yeah, certainly there's a path for, we've been seeing the Red Sox sitting two of Meyer and Anthony, and maybe now it's only or both of Ref Snyder and Romy Gonzalez. So maybe it becomes, with Abreu, it was going to become a worse log jam. Now it becomes a little bit easier on that front.
I've seen some early speculation that Rafael Devers might play first base for the Giants. What is the reaction? What does that mean, JP? If he plays for the Giants in any defensive position, what does that say about the relationship he had at the end with the Red Sox?
I think the one thing in the Giants' favor is there's a clean slate. So when they bring him in, they could say to him right away, listen, the reason we made this trade is we want you to play first base. Maybe not all the time. And I'm sure he's going to be much more open going to a new team and saying, I'll try it. Hey, give me a couple of weeks. Let me take ground balls early. Let me feel comfortable. But I'll go over there and play first base for you. And that's a team that obviously needs a first baseman. So I think it's funny how guys change when they go to different places and they're a little bit more open. Guys go to the Yankees in the years past and they had no problem shaving, and wearing their pants high.
A-Rod being a third baseman.
Yeah. I think he's going to end up playing some first base in San Francisco. And
I do want to throw out there. I think there was
Alex, not to cut you off, but when Buster Posey goes to you and asks you, it's a lot different, than maybe coming from not so much Craig Breslow because he was a pitcher, but that's a Hall of Famer. That's like the equivalent of David Ortiz coming to you and asking you to do something. And I think Devers respects the game so much that he's going to take it a little different coming from a guy like that.
Yeah, I do think that there was still, at least in some parts of the Red Sox, a question as to whether or not there might be a second half conversation with Devers about the idea of playing a position. He's been taking ground balls in the field again of late, which suggests to me that the hamstring, the hamstring thing that seemed to be affecting him last week in New York, probably affecting him less than we had thought, because in back-to-back days, which I hadn't seen in ages, he was there taking ground balls in at shortstop. But I do wonder whether or not that was kind of an accelerant as well. The whole fact that it was ground balls at shortstop as opposed to at a position that might actually have some relevance to him. We shouldn't dismiss how optics can play a role in these decisions. Well, again, rolling back with Manny in 2008, part of the reason why the Red Sox decided to make that trade was because they got tired of him holding up the signage and, Manny disappearing into the green monster during pitching changes and joking about relieving himself and that sort of thing. So, I do wonder whether or not that was the whole Devers taking grounders at shortstop. And again, I don't know. These are just things these are thought bubbles that are forming in my own head, whether that was annoying to them or whether or not that was encouraging to them.
Well, and let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Maybe that was Devers on his own going out there and doing that, and them saying, why is he taking ground balls over there, but he won't go play first base? So there's a couple of ways I think you have to look at it. And to me, it all comes down to what the relationship is. If the relationship is confrontational or adversarial, and the player is really unhappy, there's certain ways players send messages. And I don't know because I'm not in the clubhouse, but I just
JP, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to ask you another question that you don't know the answer to, but I will ask for your opinion on this. Reading the tea leaves, what we've read over recent weeks, that it was Craig Breslow who asked him to play first base, not Alex Cora. That it was John Henry who met with Devers in Kansas City, not Craig Breslow. I mean, we don't know how big, if any, of a fracture there was there, but there clearly was something, because you had different people meeting him for different reasons and different conversations. That's a pretty good sign that there was something real going on there, right? I mean, otherwise, don't you just get everyone in a room together and work it out?
Tom, they didn't make this trade because everybody was on the same page. This guy is gone because I don't think they believe he was ever going to buy in. When the owner comes and talks to you, and the general manager comes and talks to you, and they don't see light at the end of the tunnel. I'm just looking at it from a baseball perspective. What they got back for a team like the Giants, who could take money, and they still should have got at least one solid player that they could hang their hat on. This leads me to believe that this was
irreconcilable.
Yes, that's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
Irreconcilable differences.
Yes, there you go. Obviously, a big part of this is, by all accounts, the Giants have taken the entirety of the contract. So it's a salary dump. That's a big part of it. I think I read, and I think I've looked up, they're somewhere in the 10th range of salary now after the deal. Fans expect this team to be top 3, top 5, Alex. And obviously with the trade deadline coming, would this mean they could be in a position to spend some of that money on acquiring talent and bolstering the roster?
I feel like they were probably already in position to think about taking on money. I don't think that they were, they had already said like we're committed to 2025. They were, they were continuing. But they had, even with Christian Campbell signed, right? They were exploring other long-term deals with other players, which suggests that they were willing to tack on to the financial cost of what they were willing to take on in 2025. So I don't think that this was the necessary precondition for that to happen. Could be wrong about that. I do think that it does make me wonder whether or not this is going to really put them in a much better position to be quite aggressive talking to Bregman about an extension after this year. If they decide that that he is going to go back out to market, if he's healthy for the last, let's say, 3 months of the season and looks like the player that we saw in the first 7 weeks of the season, then maybe that's where this would have the greater impact. But frankly, clearly there's a financial and contractual component of this, right? The Red Sox parted with they relieved themselves of $254 million in obligations for the remainder of Rafael Devers' contract. That's a lot of money. It does permit them greater latitude moving forward to sign long-term deals with the young guys, to pursue other talent that's not necessarily on deals of this length. But in terms of as JP kind of put it earlier, it is pretty hard to it's pretty hard to bring back a comparable talent to Rafael Devers in the short term. And if there was one on the market, then you would think that they would be intrinsically interested in him rather than relying on a trade to free up money for that.
JP, are you surprised they couldn't get more out of this?
Yeah, because I think, and this is what leads me to believe that they just wanted to get rid of the player. Because the package they got back, it's very average. And I think if a team was going to take, all the money, but you were in a position to say, hey, I'm going to take him off the market. You knew the Giants were willing to spend money. I think you could have pried one of their better prospects, or at least one to hang your hat on. But I just keep coming back to the talent, and it just leads me to believe that the Red Sox really were in a hurry to get rid of Devers.
Is it worth jumping in for a second and just kind of like thinking through what the package is, like, going guy by guy? You already mentioned Harrison. You see him and you have history, JP, as from your years as a member of the Giants front office, you have history with Harrison. He was a really hot pitching prospect entering as recently as the 2024 season. He was roughly top 25 in all of baseball. Looks like he has a really good fastball, right? Like, there's some good qualities to the fastball. Doesn't look like he's been able to have the supporting pitches to really solidify himself as a starting pitcher necessarily. Is that your view of him as a tweener? Like he needs to develop the off-speed stuff in order to be a starter.
He has a really good fastball that he doesn't command. He has a really good breaking ball that he doesn't command. And one of the problems is when you don't command it, you can't be a starter. When you come out of the pen and you can't command it, it's tough to put guys in position where they're going to have runners on base all the time. So he'll have some flashes where he's really good. But for the most part, I see him, if you're going to put him as a starter, he's a fifth starter at best. And if you're going to put him in the pen, he's probably a sixth or seventh inning guy. Maybe you can massage him through to get him a little better to what he has. Bailey knows him really well. He had him. Hicks is a guy who's always had a good arm. They tried to make a starter of him. He failed as a starter. He pitches a little better out of the pen. But he's a reliever. And like I said, the kid from Florida State, Tibbs, the outfielder, he's supposed to be a plus hitter, but he's not hitting.
Yeah.
And defensive stuff is a little questionable. And I don't know the fourth player, but once again, there's not one player you hang your hat on and say, at least we got this guy back and we can build around him. So,
yeah. For what it's worth, the feedback that I've gotten on Tibbs is that the batting average this year had been in the 250-ish range in high A, which is not a standout number. On-base stuff had been very good command of the strike zone. The Red Sox liked him in the 2024 draft. He was kind of in that pocket, like they got Braden Montgomery, and so that wiped out the other options. But he had been kind of a guy who was in that consideration where the Red Sox picked in the middle of the first round. So, he flashes above average power potential with good on base skills. But this is I think that your hope is that you're able to massage that into an average everyday player, rather than a real standout.
Where does he fit? Plus, you have Garcia coming up, who's going to be a very good player.
Yeah, he fits in prospect inventory when you're looking to add a bat at the trade deadline.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's probably where he fits, because he's not a better athlete than what they have running out there right now.
And then Bello, from what I understand, Jose Bello is a guy who sits 93, is touched 95. He's a 20-year-old in the Arizona Complex League with a pretty good breaking ball. So pure lottery ticket. That's you just assume that like a best case scenario is getting a low leverage reliever, because when you have a guy who's being successful in Complex League, it's kind of foolhardy to assume that he can ever be anything more than that. You hope he surprises you a few years down the road.
Yeah. 4 earned runs in 18 innings in the Arizona Complex League so far for Bello. I think most Red Sox fans would be surprised if we told you right now that the Red Sox are a half game out of a playoff spot. Right, this 5-game winning streak has them right back in the thick of the wild card. Obviously, they've made up ground in the American League East, now 6.5 back. But they're very much in the mix. Alex, are they more or less a playoff contender tonight than they were at about 4:30 this afternoon when they were celebrating a 2-0 win?
Yeah, I would say that on paper, from just a pure roster talent standpoint, they're less of a playoff contender right now. Again, the two major league components of this deal, one of them they just optioned to Triple-A, and the other one is on the injured list. So from that vantage point alone of bodies on the roster, they are in a lesser position now than they were, and that's not even accounting for the fact that Rafael Devers' production had been otherworldly since roughly mid-April at this point. So that said, again, there are parts of running a baseball team and building a baseball team that go beyond just the projected performance of players. And we have not had to this point any indications of Devers having become quote unquote a cultural problem that would have negatively affected other parts of the roster. But if that existed, or if the team believed that those existed, then that's where there's an unseen element where you're like, maybe that's what they were seeing that would better position them for 2025. But yeah, I think that even with the possibility of Yoshida and Bregman coming back, the idea of not having Devers and having more depth of arms, it's hard to say that they're going to project as a better as a likelier contender now than they did.
JP, you mentioned the prospect capital, which they still have. If you were the general manager of this team, what's next? What do you do over the next 5-6 weeks to improve on those playoff chances?
Well, obviously, you're not going to replace that bat. There's not anybody in the organization who's going to replace the bat. So you got to try to build like a core of players that you probably can rotate through and play the hot hands with the Ref Snyders and the Gonzalez's and the players like that, and try to just match and mix and match through the rest of the season. But that's a major, major bat to lose. If you think of, it's comparable to losing Aaron Judge for the Yankees. Obviously, Judge is having an even greater year than Devers is, but you've taken out a major, major cog out of your offense. So there's going to have to be a lot of mixing and matching done, and that's where the challenge is going to be to Cora.
All right, so this has been a special and still is. I'm not saying goodbye yet, but a special edition of 310 to Left, presented by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, the best-selling truck in America for 48 years and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Want to alert you that we will have continuing coverage throughout the day tomorrow. 8 a.m., Boston has entered the chat, comes your way. We'll be on from 8 to 10. At 10 o'clock, a special edition of 310 to Left. Alex, you'll be back along with Lenny DiNardo. We'll see if I can pop in. We got a late
this
night.
Is breaking
tomorrow.
news for me. I love
congratulations
for the schedule update.
Yes, it's so much easier than emailing you after we sign off. I will be with you tomorrow night, 8:30 pregame show as the Red Sox get ready to take on Seattle. That, of course, on NESN. 9:30 game as they start the West Coast trip. We'll have plenty to talk about tomorrow night as we come your way. And then, of course, I might as well tease it. Friday night, 9 o'clock pregame, Red Sox Giants as the Sox face Rafael Devers and San Francisco for the first time over the weekend. I got to ask you real quick, JP, we don't have a ton of time left, but I've always wondered that as a fan. Did that ever appear on your radar? The fact, can I just hold this trade till after we play them in a week?
Yeah, more than once it's crossed your mind, but only in baseball, right? You trade a guy and he turns around, he comes right back to play you. That's crazy.
Seems to happen all the time, or a guy gets traded across the diamond. All right, so Alex, we're going to let you go because I think you just found out you have to work in the morning, so we don't want to keep you too long. But just again, a shocker. After all the good vibes of this afternoon, there is going to be an interesting week ahead for the Red Sox and all their fans because Rafael Devers has been traded to the San Francisco Giants. The pitchers Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, and Jose Bello. The outfield prospects James Tibbs III coming in return. Tomorrow morning, 8 a.m., our coverage rolls on with Boston has entered the chat. Hope you can join us then. For Alex Speier, JP Ricciardi, I'm Tom Caron. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to you guys.
You too.
And happy
Take
Father's
care.
Day to everyone.
Hope
Thanks
that everyone had a really special time with everyone they love today, and
Yes.
And then got to digest this together. What fun!
I hope you all got fewer texts than I got over the course of my Father's Day evening. I'm going to go back and watch the U.S. Open now on tape. But thanks, everybody. Thanks for checking it out. Back tomorrow, continuing coverage of the Rafael Devers trade to St. Louis.